Good evening, everyone. James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season premiere of His Dark Materials on HBO. This show premiered last night on BBC One, but sadly we get the episodes one day late in the United States. The show is based on Philip Pullman's books of the same name, and it's my understanding that season 1, which is 8 episodes long, will tackle the events of the first novel, Northern Lights as it's known in the UK, and The Golden Compass here in the US. If you're new to this world, you should know that these books have a very passionate fan base going all the way back to the mid-90s when the first novel was published. One of the most passionate fans, writer Jack Thorne, has enjoyed the rare privilege of getting to write each and every episode of the show, one that's already been renewed for season 2. Having only read the first book, I can't claim to be an expert on Pullman's world, but I do consider myself a fan. I'm obsessed with the fantasy genre, and when I heard the show was coming our way, I knew I at least had to get the first book under my belt before the show arrived. But not to worry, as I review this episode, I won't spoil anything from the book that wasn't featured in tonight's episode. The type of fantasy I typically read usually falls into the darker, more traditional sword and sorcery camp. Authors like Joe Abercrombie, R. Scott Bakker, Steven Erikson, and of course George R. R. Martin. But in spite of my usual aversion to any books described as young adult fiction, I loved how the story of The Golden Compass gave me a very refreshing change of scenery from the grim and gritty fare I typically look for. Pullman's creation is completely and utterly his own, unlike any other fantasy novel I've ever read. The story is set in a parallel world with many similarities to our own, but in so many other crucial ways, this environment is almost completely unrecognizable. In this world, human beings and their souls, known as demons, coexist right alongside one another as lifelong companions and protectors, with the demon taking on a variety of different animal shapes before finally settling on one form as the person reaches adulthood. This is also a dangerous world fraught with peril, dominated by an authoritarian theocracy known as the Magisterium, which seeks to control what people think and how they live their lives. Any attempt to explore ideas that they view to be heretical could have dire consequences. And because of the role the Magisterium plays in the story, some folks have criticized these books as being anti-religion, but I don't know if I necessarily see it from the same point of view. I basically saw the first book as anti-authoritarian because, as we all know, authoritarianism and domineering ideologies can come in many different forms. But at the heart of this story, we have Lyra, played by Daphne Keane, who people will remember as the utterly ferocious Laura in the movie Logan. She lives in Jordan College, Oxford, among a variety of crusty old academics, with only her demon Pantalaimon and her fellow orphan Roger as her closest companions. Lyra is in absolute awe of her uncle, Lord Asriel, a globe-trotting adventurer played by James McAvoy, who I should add is obsessed with these books and read them all in his early 20s. Lyra is desperate for the affection that a family would provide, but sadly, her uncle, Lord Asriel, has neither the time nor the inclination to give her what she craves. This episode begins slightly different from the book because the book is basically entirely from Lyra's point of view, but in a scene that apparently comes from Pullman's companion trilogy, we see a flashback from 12 years prior with Lord Asriel arriving at Jordan College and invoking scholastic sanctuary with the master, demanding that he take Lyra under his protection. Also, quick side note, I'm an American, obviously, and I'm naturally going to butcher the proper pronunciation of a lot of the names and terminology associated with this world, but I'll be back on firm footing once the character of Lee Scoresby enters the story. In any event, the show does a pretty good job of introducing new audience members to this world, with some key info at the opening about the sacred relationship between humans and their demons, and how witches in the north have a prophecy about a child of destiny. One that will challenge the dominance of the Magisterium. As we learn from the Master later in the episode, he's aware of this prophecy, but Lyra can't be led by the nose and has to discover her fate in her own fashion. I should also mention that this episode and the next were directed by Tom Hooper, the director behind The King's Speech, Les Mis, and the upcoming film Cats. I can't say I'm the world's biggest fan of his work, but I think he did a perfectly fine job with how he handled this premiere. The best scenes, in my opinion, were of Lyra and her friend Roger exploring the college, prowling the rooftops, which gave us an ideal chance to take in all the details of this foreign world. I was also impressed with how seamlessly they managed to integrate Lyra's demon Pantalaimon into the show. Computer-generated characters are always tricky, but I found the character Pan to be adorable, and actor Kit Connor is the actor behind Pantalaimon's voice. The main drama of this episode is what Lord Asriel's discovered in the far north, revelations that could put the entire college in jeopardy with unwanted attention from the Magisterium. Jordan College has a lot of autonomy, but with certain limits where they can't go against the strict orthodoxy of the Magisterium's beliefs. The Bible in this world is similar to the Bible in ours, but with certain key differences accounting for the existence of demons. The Master is so threatened by Asriel's return, he attempts to poison him outright, and he would have succeeded if not for Lyra's intervention. Azrael nearly breaks her arm when he discovers her in his chamber, but then he puts her to work spying on the Master during his upcoming presentation about the North and what he's learned about dust. Dust is a mysterious substance that only gathers around adults and not children, but more importantly, Lord Azrael's discovered that the Northern Lights are actually a giant doorway to other worlds, worlds not controlled by the Magisterium, a heretical idea that sends these academics into an absolute panic. From Azrael's point of view, a war for true academic freedom is underway, and he wants to know who's going to oppose him. The school agrees to back the next stage in his research, and then to Lyra's horror, sends him back north in an airship. Watching Lyra beg to be included was truly heartbreaking. It's pretty incredible how much plot they managed to pack into this episode. Obviously, when you're dealing with these giant sci-fi and fantasy novels, I feel like long-form television is a much better format as opposed to feature films. I have not seen the 2007 film adaptation of this book, but my understanding is that it just breezes through so many crucial details. But in this episode, we also learn about the Gyptians, led by John Fa and Farder Coram. A mysterious group known only as the Gobblers has been kidnapping their children, and so the Gyptians decide to take their boats downriver to London, where they hope to find their kids or fight to get them back. The other major character we meet this episode is Marissa Coulter, played by Ruth Wilson. I always love a good villain, in particular when they're capable of such sinister charm, and from what we've seen in the trailers and teasers, it looks like Ruth Wilson's going to go all out with her portrayal of this character. But for now, in this first episode, Lyra's simply happy to meet someone who's so sophisticated and charming, and she accepts a job as her assistant back in London. Then in secret, the Master gives Lyra an item that's going to be crucial to the rest of the story, almost like the ring in The Lord of the Rings, because the Master gives her the alethiometer, one of only 6 in existence. It was with Lyra when she was brought to the college as a baby, and it'll be up to Lyra and Pantalaimon to learn how to use it in order to fulfill their destiny. It's essentially a device for discovering the truth, but it's also illegal in the eyes of the Magisterium. But one of the ingredients I'm really enjoying so far is how the show depicts this world as one where danger lurks around every corner. We see poor Roger getting abducted by the Gobblers as well, and he looked particularly pitiful in his cage as the episode drew to a close. But the big highlight was the teaser for what's to come in future episodes. Yorick Bernison looks fucking incredible, and I'll be watching this show devotedly just to see the bears in action. They were by far my favorite part of the book. So it's obviously too early to have any strong opinions about this show, but I'll say that it has me on the hook, and I think it should end up finding a proper audience, whether those people have read the books or not. I'm eagerly looking forward to the rest of the season, and when the season ends, I imagine I'll most likely be taking a crack at the second book, The Subtle Knife. But quick question, if you consider yourself a Rabid fan and have read the entire series, I'd love to hear from people down in the comments below what Rabid fans think about this first taste of the show. But I think that's all I got to say for now. If you enjoyed this review, please give the video a like, the channel subscribe. If you want to talk more, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrax, or like I said, just leave a comment in the comments below. But I can't thank you enough for watching the video. Really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.